I'm always worried that I might forget. We have a lot of people who love to rewatch these and watch the recording afterwards. So click through here. So today's presentation, we're going to go through the importance of reviews. I know it's a hot topic. It's something we've covered a lot in other webinars, or we've touched on, especially in other webinars, and the importance. And look, it's becoming more and more important. And I'm sure most businesses have found that. The difficulty is around reviews. We love to get them, but it's tricky if you do get one that you aren't really happy with. So today we're going to talk to an expert on some of the triggers that may cause a bad review, how to actually ask for some feedback. It's always great to have positive feedback to counteract any negative feedback you do get. What you should do if you do get a bad review, Andrew's going to talk about some best practices, and of course there's different everybody has a different circumstance, so we can't answer every scenario, but Andrew's happy to stay on for a little while afterwards and answer some questions and perhaps help you with any issues that you have. And also he will talk a bit about his business, which is around removing false reviews. We've talked in the past about it being very, very difficult. It is still difficult, which is why his business exists. Now, your presenter today is Andrew. He's joining us from his office. I think it's in Sydney, was it, Andrew? I'll have to double check. We did a test run yesterday. Andrew has an open plan office, so hopefully it's not too noisy down there today. Andrew is the founder or co-founder of Removify. He's found over his years of experience in digital agencies that reviews can have a huge impact on a business, and especially businesses in our industry where people are relying heavily on social proof. So without further ado, I will hand over to Andrew. We will do the usual clicking of buttons. If you do have questions, as I said, please type them in. We will probably stop at the end unless there's a lot of questions coming through on a particular topic. So Andrew, if you are with me, I'm going to make you the presenter and we shall see your screen and hopefully hear you.
Yes, I'm here. Hopefully you can hear me.
I can hear you loud and clear. If everyone can just type in that you can hear. Andrew, how are you, Andrew? Sorry, were you in Sydney or Melbourne?
No, we're in Melbourne. Yeah.
Melbourne, yeah. It seems everybody I'm talking to lately is in Melbourne. So how's the weather down there?
It's actually quite nice today. It's going to be 19 here, although at best I see it out my window.
Lovely. Well, I'm based in Coffs Harbour. So for you members on the other side of the country may never have heard of Coffs Harbour. I'm halfway between Sydney and Brisbane, and the weather is usually lovely, but we're getting a lot of wind. So, and for our members up in Queensland, hopefully the bushfires aren't anywhere near you. So we have a couple of bushfires here as well. So Andrew, it sounds like everybody can hear you. Thanks, Denise. Thanks, Rodney. Everybody's writing in that they can hear you. Are you right to go, Andrew? I will mute myself. I'll be in the background, and I will leave it to you.
Sounds good. Okay. Well, welcome everyone, and thanks for jumping on. Harry's already done the intro about my background. I've been involved in digital for a while, both on the marketing side and the technology side. Lots of stuff with Google in the past. And this new business, as we said, is very focused on managing reviews, in particular the sort of unfair negative stuff that happens, which happens a lot. So I'll jump straight in to talk about the things we're going through today. So Kerry gave an overview too. Here's how I've structured it. We'll talk a bit about why they matter. I think the fact that you're on this webinar probably proves you already know they matter, so I'm not going to dwell in that area too much, but there's some interesting statistics just to be aware of. Then we'll get into some analysis that we did specific to building, construction and trades industries, just to see what we found, what's happening with the reviews specific to your industries. Then, as Kerry said, we'll talk about this whole world of actually asking not just for reviews, but asking for feedback from your customers. The topic there for me is really about being proactive. If there's anything you get out of today more than anything, it's the idea that being proactive about your online reputation is the way to go, because if you're not proactive, there's going to be a natural bias towards negativity, unfortunately, just for the very fact that unhappy people tend to be more motivated. And as many of us will already sort of know, um, happy, satisfied people just don't tend to leave reviews as often as someone who's grumpy about something. So again, that lesson there, the theme to remember here is about being proactive. Don't just let it happen. So on that same theme, we'll get into actually how to handle bad reviews. Gonna happen at some point, but they can happen coming from various different scenarios that we'll go into. Probably everyone listening's experienced it in one way or another, but we'll get into that, and then maybe that's where at the end people can ask questions about some specific scenarios if I don't cover them. And then, as we said, this option of being able to remove some of them, some people don't even realise it is an option. So I'll explain how and when it can be an option, just so you can consider that either for now or in the future. So let's jump straight in. Why do reviews matter? Like I said, you're probably already feeling this, but I like to summarise it. Like the biggest lesson with this is in a word, millennials. Millennials, it's that sort of 18 to 34 age bracket, and maybe a few years on top of that too. These are the people that grew up with phones. They've had a phone since they were at least a teenager. They grew up with reviews. They're used to relying on reviews. They leave reviews. They're very, very active. And what's happening is they're getting older, and they are now becoming one of the biggest spending brackets in the economy. So you've got these people who have now got some money, who are now spending that money, who are now very active in the market. And as you can see here in one of these stats, the average first home buyer in Australia is 34 years old. So that's falling into that bracket now, and that's now. So over the coming years, these are the people who are spending money. They care about reviews, even if you don't, or even if whoever's running your company doesn't think they matter because they don't use reviews. The people who are now spending more and more money, they do care. They do check these reviews. You can see some of the stats here. Some pretty in-depth studies have shown that in the next 10 years, 2 out of every $3 spent in Australia will be by someone who grew up with online reviews, so this millennial crowd. So big lesson there, these are the people with money, and they're going to be the ones spending on services going forward from here. If we think about what it really means, what we're really talking about here with reviews is that it's related to new customers, people who have used you before as a regular, and maybe you're their go-to handyman. You might be the construction company that's done multiple projects for a developer. That's a different story. Here, we're particularly talking about your ability to get brand new customers who hadn't heard of you before. As you see, I'm saying here, reviews are the digital version now of word of mouth. Again, people who are very active with reviews, they trust them. As you can see here, the stats, 85% of consumers say that they trust online reviews just as much as a personal recommendation. Now, why else does it matter? These are the same people who are used to relying on their phone to find stuff that they don't currently know about yet, right? They literally ask Siri or Google or Cortana or whoever they've got on their phone questions all day. They're used to turning to Google. Now, Google is now very active in this review space. Google is aggressively asking people to leave reviews of businesses. Google loves reviews because for Google, reviews is free content. It brings free traffic for them, and they make money off their advertising that comes from traffic. So Google is more and more aggressive in this space, and Google is where people turn to when they don't know where else to find something, right? So we're talking about anything from, if you think of any project, even just a residential home project of fixing your roof, calling in a plumber, getting a full landscaping job done, any of that stuff. Google is a major channel for getting new business when someone's never done that kind of project before. Google is going to send you more business if you're a high rating business. Your summary ratings, like the number of reviews you have and the quality of those reviews, are you getting 1 stars or 5 stars, is a huge driver for whether you're going to get that click, whether you're going to get that traffic, so whether you're going to get that phone call or someone else is. So paying some attention to what your overall rating is if you are listed on Google, which you would want to be if you want to be found by some new business. It matters. It matters for making your phone ring for new customers in particular. So that's the reason I mentioned some stats there about voice searches is, again, there's really, really strong trends. And if you look to other countries that are often a year or two ahead of Australia, so I would say the US, I've spent a lot of time in the US. Typically things happen there, like I said, a year or two before. All the statistics there show this huge reliance, not just on their phones, but like using the phone as a personal assistant, not just their phone, even the home devices now, like Google Home and the Alexa type things that you plug in at home. The use of those is skyrocketing. And as I said, people are treating them as their digital personal assistant. And if you think of a few steps ahead there, well, who is a digital personal assistant going to recommend if you ask it for something? It's one of the only things it can rely on for determining like who a quality contractor is, for example, is reviews. So this world that we thought was a long way away, it's already here. This whole thing of being able to ask Siri a question has been happening for years, and a recommendation of which business to use. It's already happening. I'll jump ahead here to just an analysis we did. So just this is a very basic graph just to show numbers we found. What we did is we went out and grabbed all of the reviews in Australia for quite a lot of different business types related to the HIA. So building companies, home construction, home contractors, everything relating to the sort of building industry and trade. We literally went and collected all of the reviews, counted them up and did some analysis of them. This graph is just to show the growth that we can see. This is, again, specific to those industries. This is how many reviews are out there just on Google right now, and the sort of, well, at least the growth that's been happening over the last 4 or 5 years. The trend is pretty obvious. The direction it's all going is pretty obvious. We didn't even need to draw 2020 in there to sort of know what that's going to look like. So again, these reviews are in some ways going to happen whether you like it or not. So again, back to that lesson of being proactive, it's are you going to play the game? Are you going to be involved? Are you going to manage what you're doing, or are you just going to let it happen? Again, because how aggressive the different platforms are is very clear. As I said, Google is being really, really aggressive in this space, trying to get as many reviews as possible from anyone with a phone. So I'm going to move on and look at what we found in our analysis. I'll talk you through this. I don't have to get too bogged down in numbers or anything, but like as I said, we grabbed every review we could, which is over 100,000 Google reviews relating to your industries in Australia. Quite a few lessons we got out of it. We do this a lot. Sometimes there's some really interesting things that you wouldn't expect. Sometimes it's exactly what you expect, but it's always nice to at least get some confirmation. So the sort of themes that you would expect to see in different types of reviews that we've sort of laid out here. So I'll start with this first one. No one would be surprised to find out that one of the big complaints about any kind of project is time, if it runs over time. Now that was a really common theme across different reviews, but what we saw pretty clearly was time itself was not always the main problem. It was a combination of time and poor communication that often led to getting a bad review. So we're sort of saying here lessons to learn from that, or insights to get. Projects are going to run over. It happens, and I think even customers expect that. The point is, if you are not realistic at setting expectations, if you're not good with your communication, it's that combination that leaves customers particularly dissatisfied, and as we've seen, particularly motivated to leave a poor review. So again, the fact that people are upset when projects run over is not the big lesson. It's how you manage that. It's your customer service, as you might expect, that really matters. Number two, well, the numbering's wrong here. Just pretend you didn't see that. The second thing we saw is the topic, of course, of quotes and money. Now, we would expect that for sure. If people think they've been charged too much or haven't stuck to their quote, very, very frequent theme in negative reviews is that combination of the quote and the money. So just knowing that is something to be thinking about when you're dealing with your customers. But one of the particular things out of that is I know that in some industries, when you're particularly busy and you quote higher as a sort of way of pushing off a project. It's sort of just saying, well, we can take it on, but you'll need to pay more. Just a way of sort of saying you don't really want that job is to quote high. One of the lessons here is every interaction counts, and even just quoting somebody that you never do the job for can still lead to a poor review, because that's their experience with you as a company or as a trader, whatever you are. If that quote was very high and they're upset and they go somewhere else and get a more realistic quote that's half or less or something like that, we found that frequently they'll come back and leave a negative review just because you quoted them so high. Because they see you in a poor light now. They think you were trying to rip them off. Things like that, because you were quoting so high. And maybe it was a tool you were using just to sort of keep your books manageable, and you're so busy and you're just quoting a lot because of how busy you are. Just sort of be aware that it can have an impact, because every interaction people have with you is sort of vulnerable to an online review. This last point I'm making here is a funny one, but it was really, really obvious in what we found in the reviews. An old quote here: people will always remember how you made them feel. The larger quote is something like, they may not remember exactly what you did or what you said, they'll remember how you made them feel. That was really obvious in analysing the reviews, especially with the positives. We didn't tend to talk about the details of the project so much as how they felt about the interaction with your team. They often talk about the team, they often talk about the staff, they often talk about all these words about it being a pleasurable experience, a friendly experience, smooth project, the process. They describe the process as feeling easy and well managed, all these kinds of words. But the theme we really saw there was, again, how people were feeling literally emotionally out of the whole experience, which, as I was saying here, the lesson is to think about who's the customer interacting with in your team. Who is your project manager? Is it you? Is it someone else in your team? Are they a good people person? Are they the best people person? You might be excellent at managing projects. You may not actually be a great people person. Just thinking about things like this, just because those reviews lead to new business in future. And likability, basically, the likability of the person you're dealing with really ends up mattering. So this may be an interesting lesson to take out of just the way you run your projects. I'll move on to the topic of feedback. We're sort of careful here not to say that this is about asking for reviews, because it's not the best way to think about it. You're not asking for a positive review. That's jumping the gun a bit. What we're talking about is why you want to ask for feedback, and what's the benefits of asking for feedback. Think about how are you doing that right now, and when are you doing it right now. If it's a larger project, are you waiting until the end, or are you having some checkpoints during the project just to check in and see how they're feeling? The benefits for this is more than just trying to get some 5-star reviews out of your customers. And so you can see, we sort of listed some things out here. There's some real key benefits about asking for feedback. One is that statistically, satisfied customers don't tend to leave reviews, not as often as dissatisfied customers. They just don't tend to be as motivated. However, a really high percentage, and it can be 70, 80%, will actually leave a review. They just had to be prompted. It just had to be reminded that it would be nice if they left a review if they're happy. Because this is the world of expectations we're in now. Some people are these some people just have high expectations, and when you meet them, they're not going to go out of their way to leave a review. But the fact that you followed up and asked for some feedback and reminded them that a review would be nice can be a really powerful process just in itself. But much bigger than that, when we run these feedback processes, not just for ourselves but for our clients, as big, if not bigger, of a benefit of asking for feedback is this one about intercepting negativity. If there's any level of dissatisfaction at all, the very fact that you've asked for feedback, and again, you asked for feedback, you didn't ask for a review, asking for feedback gives you a chance to deal with it privately. It gives you a chance to solve the problem. Letting that kind of thing fester and just come out publicly through a review later, you've missed your opportunity. Asking for feedback can be really, really powerful because you trap this negativity and you deal with this negativity as early as possible. What that actually does as well is it gives you an opportunity to show your customer service. And when you turn a negative into a positive, when you solve a problem, that's an opportunity. You've shown them that you're willing to deal with issues. You've sort of taken them from sad to happy, a really sort of basic way. And that can be really powerful. And we see very, very frequently that someone who's had an initially poor experience, where the problem then got solved, will then leave a 5-star or positive review because of how you handled it. So part of this is your attitude towards feedback and looking at negatives as opportunities. So like negative feedback as opportunities. It's opportunities for you to perform, to solve a problem. It might feel like a hassle, but the difference between a 1-star review and a 5-star review is huge in terms of like the impact it can even just have on your overall rating, your overall presence. Plus offline, even if you just think about what these people are going to be saying offline, the old adage, for every unhappy customer, they'll tell 10 other people. It's still true. It's just problem is now if they jump online, they might be telling 1 million other people. So again, that whole attitude of treating it as an opportunity is the way to go. And again, as I'm saying at the bottom here, feedback is important to any business, right? If you're open-minded and you realize you're not perfect yet, this feedback, it's useful because you just may not know what they're thinking. You may not realize that customers expect a certain level of communication that you're not giving, or any other number of problems. You sometimes just need to ask, find that out, and then you can improve your service, which surely everyone at all times should be trying to do. Improving what you do should basically be a constant thing of any business, but that's obviously a much wider business lesson. I would go back though to say, remember, as I said at the start, this is a bit of a millennials focused thing for some of the digital world. Remember that one of the traits of that demographic, if I'm allowed to do a broad stereotype here, is they can often be non-confrontational, where these are the people, if you imagine you're in a restaurant and they get asked, how was everything? And they say, oh, that was great, thanks. when actually they're upset, and they then go away and leave a a 1-star review because they're sort of non-confrontational. They're so used to screens. Sometimes the way to get the feedback from them is from a screen. That's where you're going to get the most honest feedback because that's what they're used to using. They may not tell you to your face. That's just an unfortunate factor of the way the world's going now. Being able to ask, give these people an opportunity to give you feedback through an email, through an SMS, through something online rather than to your face can be quite powerful. So just remember, not everyone's old school. They're not necessarily going to want to tell you if you ask while you're on the job, so to speak. I'll talk a bit about how to ask for feedback. What does it really mean? As I was just saying, of course you can ask them in person. It's the old school way and it can get some results, but if you want to be proactive about your online reputation, you need to implement some form of process. So I'm going to describe how we do it. The rules or the process, the sort of steps involved, the things you should always consider, even whether you're going to do it yourself, use some software for yourself, or engage someone to do it for you. It depends on sort of your customer base, how many, if you've got a relatively small number of customers, this might be something that's managed by an admin person in your team if you don't have time yourself. But if you have a larger number, then having actual processes in place where it's done automatically is going to be more effective. But this is, the way we run it is through this series of steps. Hopefully the diagram helps a bit here. But what we're talking about is, first of all, you've got to go digital, right? So as I was just saying, you've got to get something on a screen in front of people because one of the key things there is you want to make it as easy as possible. Ideally, if they're happy, you only want it to be a couple of clicks, a couple of taps to get them from phone or laptop, whatever they are, to actually leaving the review. And what I mean by that is, you actually just think about it. If you manually emailed one of your customers, hey, if you're happy with the work we did for you, we'd love you to leave us a review on Google. And that's all you said in the email. What do you actually expect them to do now? They're going to go to Google, but search for your company, hang on now, what are we talking about? The maps listing? Which maps listing? So we're not actually always clear where you mean and how to get there. And it might be like a few minutes work minimum just to do it when, again, in this day and age, attention spans are short. You got to make things easy. So the processes we always put in place is that this series of steps is number one, through an SMS or an email message, you ask for feedback. You're not asking for a review, you're asking for feedback. They will, through that email or through a link in the email or through a page that we send them, immediately within that message, tap or click to indicate how they're feeling. Are you happy, or is there something that's causing it to be a 1, 2, 3, 4 star that you're not perfectly happy? Based on their response, we can automatically determine what to do. So with the way we run it, again, if someone indicates that they're happy and they tap 5 stars in this message that they get sent, they can be automatically redirected to the place where you want them to leave a review. So automatically sort of encouraged, taken directly to not just the listing, it can even be the listing with the box popped up, ready for them to type their review directly in. You've removed every possible step. You've idiot-proofed it. Literally, they just have to spend an extra 20 seconds, 30 seconds leaving you that positive review rather than clicking around, et cetera, et cetera. Again, we're taking as many steps as possible. If you have somebody who's not completely happy, and we can actually choose what happy is, right? We can say, look, we only, anything that's 4 stars or less or 3 stars or less, you can kind of make that choice. You can then prompt them, well, please give us some private feedback. Let's not go to Google and leave that review right now. First, let's see what your issue is that's making you not completely happy, because maybe we can do something about it. We want to fix the problem. So those people can be presented with a form, an email, or a page to tell you why they're not perfectly happy and give you a chance to do something about it. Now, what you do from there is up to you, but more than likely you're going to want to fix that problem if there was a problem. It might just be that there's some feedback for you to take on board, and it's just, okay, it's just some valuable feedback. But again, this is the step that we've found when we run this is really, really powerful, because you can get some people who are actually quite upset. They really were quite upset, and they just hadn't told anyone online yet. They've probably told people offline. Now that they've been asked, yeah, they're going to tell you. They give you that message, and you can take that on board and try to deal with their problem. Again, we see over and over, if you can do a good job of fixing that problem, at worst you've mitigated the issue. At worst you've sort of stopped them from going any further. But quite often it will turn into a positive review based on how well you handled the situation. So you can really turn people into fans based on how you handle issues. So if you're trying to implement something like this for yourself, these are sort of the rules of thumb to try and use with it. We'd be very careful to say this is not gaming the system, really, right? This is not where you ask for a review and only post positive reviews to your website and you throw their negative reviews away. That's actually, I think, banned by the ACCC. That's not what we're talking about here, because this is more of a survey. It's a feedback survey. You want to find out the good, the bad, the ugly. It's just you're going to provide an extra step to encourage a review in the place that you want the review from the happy customer. That's the sort of rules of thumb you want to implement. You want to think about when is the right time to do this. If you don't have habits in place, then it can so easily fall by the wayside. So just think about what's the sort of event in your process that should drive this. If you've got an admin person, it can be tied to perhaps before you send the final invoice. It could be just after you send the final invoice. We want to test how customers are feeling and which one works better for your size of your projects. But building it into a system, the whole idea is doing this regularly is a proactive way to accumulate feedback, and in the end, you do end up accumulating a lot of 5-star reviews online because you've had a chance to improve your service, you've had a chance to deal with issues, and because you've just been asking people, hey, since you're happy, can you please leave a review? So that's the kind of systems that we implement, and we really do find it very powerful. We run it for ourselves, we run it for our clients, and I mean, I can't say enough about how powerful just something as simple as this can be. So again, ask yourself, what are we doing in this space right now? Because when your head in the sand means it happens to you rather than you getting to sort of manage it yourself. So I'll move on to sort of more the juicier stuff. The juicier stuff here, again, the numbering system has broken, I apologize, but we'll talk about 3 different scenarios, broadly speaking, of where a bad review could come from. There's obviously lots of reasons they can happen, but these are sort of 3 scenarios that we can talk about for now. We'll see if there's any others at the end if they're missed. So the first one we'll talk about is what we would say where it's a real customer. This is not a fake. This is someone you did have some dealings with, and they're giving their side of a story on a complaint. The complaint itself, you might not agree with it, but they're not, making up a story. They're not attacking you. They're not going particularly over the top. Again, you may not agree with it, but it's still their feedback. So that's how we're going to approach those. It's still feedback. It's a complaint. What can we do about that? Second scenario listed there is, again, customer that you recognise. You know who it is, but you really do feel that their complaint is unreasonable. It may be factually inaccurate. It's one where you read it, and other than the fact that nobody really likes criticism, these are the kind of ones where you read it and it just doesn't feel fair, to the point that it is damaging. You really would like to do something about it. This is a big area, I gotta be honest. This is probably the biggest area. But the other third one there listed with the third number one is this other whole world where it's either completely fake, you don't recognise it, you have no idea who it is, or maybe you do know who it is, but you certainly didn't have any genuine work dealings with them, not for genuine projects. Types of things we see here. So we see literally hundreds and hundreds of these every day. Scenarios, it's either fake, completely fake. It's often a competitor that's trying to attack you and bring you down. It could be like an ex-employee or like or a subcontractor, someone that you were sort of working as part of your team that left on poor terms. We actually see a lot of this where they come back and pretend to be a disgruntled customer and attack you. We've had some real big stuff with this. So even if you haven't suffered from this yet, fortunately, it does seem like people and it is in the construction industry we've dealt with here, because of maybe those relationships with subcontractors, because sometimes the union can get involved. There's all these scenarios out there we've had to see where these illegitimate reviews really can come out of the woodwork suddenly, where there's some real attacks. You need to know what to do about that, either because it's already happened or it really can happen to anyone, because again, our whole business is based, a large part of our business is based around dealing with this. So we can tell you for sure it happens a lot. There's a lot of this happening. So maybe that's even why you're on the webinar today. So I'll jump into each one of these and how to handle them. So you may have ideas already, but try and go into some rules of thumb and some ways to approach this. So we'll look at the first scenario where, again, it's someone you recognise, a complaint. Again, you may not agree with it, but we're going to aim to deal with this sort of the good old school way, which is, well, let's have a look at what the problem was and see what our customer service can do to deal with this issue. So there's an example. This is not a real review; it's one we made up over here on the right, but it's a classic sort of review you might see in your space. So this review, if you read it where you are now, they're describing what happened from their point of view. They're describing what displeased them. They're giving some detail about what happened. And they're basically saying they would not recommend using this company again. Again, unhappy about the communication, which was the theme we talked about earlier. If we were presented with this with our services, we're going to say, well, the best way to deal with this one is to go straight to this person and see if you can deal with any of these issues away from the public view, because the priority here is not dealing with the review. The priority here is dealing with the customer service problem that's happened here. You've got someone here that's clearly not happy about what happened. So that's the first problem to solve, right? That's a sort of a business decision thing. This is better for your business to deal with the issue offline first, and then see what that can do about the online review later. So again, first priority, try and fix the problem. Keeping in mind, again, if you can fix that problem, there's a very good chance they'll take that review down. There's also a chance that they'll convert that review to something positive. So again, even though your priority is to make them happy because that's what you want to do as a business, it really does often get reflected in what they put online, because they've already shown that they're going to put things online. So there's a lot of motivation there to try and fix this problem. Obviously, that can't always happen. Maybe they're just not going to be reasonable. We know there's a whole bunch of reasons why, simply put, you may not be able to fix this problem, or they just may never be someone you can make happy. So the question is, what should you do next? For sure, it is better to put a response up, like the owner reply that you can put up. Again, using Google here as the example, responding to that review is a good idea for a number of reasons. One is this is your opportunity to show everybody else how you deal with issues, the tone you use, the very fact that you're showing that you're listening, the fact that you're showing that you care. These help you a lot. It can really mitigate the situation a lot, because at the end of the day, we're all human and we understand we're probably not going to find anyone that's got perfect reviews. Issues happen, unreasonable customers happen. You definitely should a response. You want to think about who's the best person to be doing that. For sure, it's someone who will not have any emotion in their veins at the time of the response. So if you're more like a sole trader, or you're a small company and this is your baby, you will naturally be defensive. You'll naturally want to fight back. You'll naturally want to give your full side of the story, and that can unfortunately naturally turn it into something that's just unsavory. That even though you got your piece and you got to say your bit back, you're just putting off other customers, because your response isn't really for Gary Peterson. It's partly for him, but it's as much for everybody else who's reading this, and them. They're spectators here on this online conversation. So you want to show how you're going to handle these kinds of situations. We're saying here, apologize, even if you don't want to, even if you feel like they're being unreasonable about what happened. If this is what they feel they experienced, you have to accept some responsibility that you were part of that experience for them. So showing that you care, again, will mitigate damage to at least to some degree. You don't recommend airing the dirty laundry. You don't need to address all their points. You want to do as much of that as possible offline, because really the most you would want to do is just pick any key points that seem particularly damaging or accusatory or that kind of thing. But for the most part, in this scenario where we're saying the complaint may actually have some validity to it, show that you're willing to improve, show that you're going to take that feedback on. And if you sound genuine, people will tend to believe it if you sound genuine. It's just, you don't want the whole thing to play out online, because it can get a bit tacky. There's obviously lots of scenarios here, so it's hard to give perfect advice, but sort of the golden rules I was saying is, like, take the emotion out of it. You're aiming to sort of get closure on the situation. You're not aiming to win. That's probably a key point. You're not trying to win here. Not in terms of versus Gary Peterson. You're trying to win the online branding challenge of how does everyone else feel about how I handled this. Probably you've got an audience here. It's the best way to think about it. We'll move on to the second one. Second scenario, this is where you've got, again, someone you recognise as a real customer, but the complaint seems very unreasonable to you. This is a bit of a grey area, because you might think all complaints are unreasonable, but let's just be realistic and sort of draw the line at a sensible place here, where I was saying earlier, a lot of reviews fall in this category, where because they are upset, or maybe they've got another motive, and that happens quite a lot, the review really can very easily, very quickly go too far. We've got some example reviews here over on the side, where, yeah, they're talking about a project that happened, but they go what we would call too far. So calling you dodgy, they're exaggerating, they're challenging whether you're even licensed or have got the qualifications to do the job. Those are much more personal attacks. They're exaggerated. This is where it can get into online defamation, basically, because they're making some pretty bold statements about you. This is going to happen a lot. So, of course, the question is, what do we do? I'll keep an eye on time, so I'm going to speed up a little bit here. Again, the golden rules are the same. You're not aiming to, you don't want to inflame the situation, even though these ones make your blood boil. They make your blood boil. I know it, because they're not being fair. They're not representing a situation accurately. But you still want to take most of that offline. You still want to take the bulk of it offline and try and deal with them directly. Just show the world that that's what you're doing. You don't want to give them a templated response where you just sort of say, hey, we'll talk to you offline. But you don't want to tit for tat every point, because people can see exaggeration with this. What you're looking to do, again, is just mitigate it best you can and take it offline. This is an area where, for sure, some of our advice is some of these can be removed permanently, not because they're fake, but because they're misrepresenting a situation and they're therefore potentially violating other policies of the platform. The platforms have a lot of policies that you probably don't know very well, but we do. These are the kinds of ones we look at and say, yes, sure, there was a project that happened here, but like I said, they've actually said something they're not allowed to say, and we can have it permanently removed because of that. So you should consider that as an option, because that 1-star review is going to drag your rating down. I'll move on quickly again because I'm cognizant of time. The third situation is this other end of the spectrum, right? You don't know who they are. It's a competitor. It's an ex-employee. It's completely fake. Maybe it's a customer whose name you recognise, but there's no real project, and they've just attacked you. We see so much of this, and again, even if you haven't had it yet, unfortunately, there's a decent chance it is going to happen. So we have to jump straight into, again, advice in this area is pretty clear. You don't necessarily have to put up with this. That's not to say they can always be removed. Fortunately, there's no 100% guarantee consistency with the way, for example, Google behaves here, but you absolutely can fight back and you don't have to put up with it. We've shown some small examples here that are short, just to fit the page. Sometimes these can be 500-word rants that just attack and attack and attack. So it's not just these little short ones that are like off the cuff type stuff. You know, these can be quite aggressive and lengthy. And we always say you just don't want them there. You're going to drag your rating down, which hurts your business, because you're going to be stuck at a 3.5 star when there's every chance you could be above 4 stars, and that kind of stuff would be different. People in that you guys deal with, they fall into these last two categories a lot, I think, because they tend to get very emotional. You know, you're working on projects that involve their home. This is if they feel there's been an issue or they haven't been dealt with, you know, satisfactorily, it might be something they have to see every day. So they might be reminded of some issue every day, and that can drive them to do and say things that then exaggerate the situation. So, like I said, a lot of stuff happens in these last two scenarios I described. The advice for sure: try and get it taken down. If that doesn't work, it's again similar rules, but if it's outright fake, it's worth stating that. You will see that commonly where you'll say, look, we don't recognise you as a customer. If we did, we'd be happy to deal with your concern here, but we're not sure that you're a customer. If you contact us offline, we're happy to deal with your concern. Things like that do a pretty good job of mitigating it, because based on the review, especially if it's low on detail, the audience reading it will often sort of agree and say, yeah, that sounded fake anyway, and you can mitigate it that way. Don't tit for tat. This stuff can inflame you. This stuff can make your blood boil as well. But showing that emotion online is not going to help you. Even though you want to punch their face in if you could. It's just not going to help your situation to show that online. So cool, calm, collected, mitigate the situation without inflaming it. Again, that's if it can't get taken down permanently. So I'm going to move on to talk about permanently removing reviews, which, as we said at the start, is something that we can do. Be careful to say it's not where we have a magic delete button. We can't delete everything. It's just there's an option to try it, and so I'll sort of explain how that happens here. Big question is how. We deal directly with, for example, Google or whoever else directly to present a case to them about why a review should be taken down. So we basically know policies and Australian law, so it's a bit like a legal representation where we go to them and argue why that review is violating either their policies or the law, and push them to take it down. So we represent you to them. We do sort of back and forth with them. We build a case, and we argue the angle that we know is going to work best based on experience. Which reviews is this for? As I was saying, it's sort of those that were falling in the last two categories that we just went over. For sure the fake stuff, but it's not just fake. There's plenty of cases where the person is real, but what they've said is not okay. It's still violating policies. So they all have to. All the people who leave a review signed up to terms and conditions when they create an account. That is then the reason a lot of stuff can get taken down because they violated those terms and conditions, which are detailed. So if you feel like the review falls into one of those last two categories, if you feel like it's unfair and inaccurate, if it's not even just clearly just false, even if it's in that grey area in the middle, there is still a chance it can come down for a policy violation. We just have to take a look. Again, there's no other way. We just have to take a look. Another question, do we contact the author? No. This is not about going to the person who wrote it and trying to get them to take it down. They're not notified. They're not part of the process. It's all done directly with the platform. Then we're often asked, well, what if can't they just post it again? Yes, they can, but because they're not notified of what's happening, they're just completely cut out of the loop. They just don't even know it's happened. It's very, very rare. I think we've only had it once in our first 10,000 removals where they came back, and that was where they were clearly already motivated. They were already leaving. They had this vendetta of a different type situation. And even then you can still deal with the situation because once something's been taken down once, it's quite easy to keep getting it taken down. It is not a problem that comes up. Generally speaking, we permanently get things down and that's sorted. And then we're often asked, how much does this cost? Which I have to say, it all depends. Depends on the platform, depends what the situation is, depends what they've said in the review, how many there are, etc. But we always do it with a no win, no fee model. So we only charge if we actually get the review taken down. It doesn't cost anything for us to have a look. Because there's this case by case nature to it, I'll put the contact details here so you can reach out and have us take a look at something to see if it's sort of vulnerable to removal or if there is something we can do about it. There are so many different situations beyond the sort of extreme fake stuff. There is all that other stuff to do. Again, feel free to use any of these contact details for us to have a look and sort of scope out what would be involved. I hope I've done the timing right. That wasn't sort of like 5 minutes officially. Sorry if that went a bit over, but I can open it up to questions for anyone that's had questions brewing. Kerry can maybe take them in chat.
Yeah. Thanks, Andrew. I think there's actually a lot of points there that I jotted down because, yeah, over the years we've done, as I said, webinars talking about, I guess, generally online marketing, and inevitably reviews comes up, and we've always sort of said that it's virtually impossible to get a review, remove a fake or a negative review that's unfair, which is why when I saw your business, I thought, well, let's put it out there that it is an option, but obviously, as we've said previously, prevention is better than cure. So I thought it was really interesting the point you made about having checkpoints. Perhaps if it's a long project, having checkpoints along the project to make sure that you're nipping anything in the bud that it's going to cause a grief at the end, rather than just leaving it at till the very end. And I'd be interested to see if any of our members currently do that. I know some members do ask for feedback, but I think that idea of having checkpoints is a really good one. And I also like that point that you made about people not necessarily wanting to tell you to your face. And I think that example you gave at the restaurant's a classic one. I know I've been in that scenario myself. So another good tip there to make sure that you're perhaps asking them on a platform that they feel comfortable being truthful. So if, Andrew, I had a question here, if obviously if you're asking a customer for some feedback or a review, they're not necessarily going to want to go on every platform and give you a review. So what's the best one? If you can only choose one, what's the most powerful? So Carissa asked, is a Google review the most powerful? Or what about other social platforms like Facebook or Houzz?
Yeah, good question. Of course, it does depend a little bit on the exact specific business and where your customers tend to hang out and where they tend to look for business. The default answer pretty easily is Google because it's the most visible by a mile. But you gave the good example there of Houzz, where in some niche parts of the industries that's going to be powerful too. Keeping in mind that you can actually distribute it out where, sure, you're not going to ask one customer to leave a review 3 different times in 3 different places, but you can have sort of one, ask one customer to go to Facebook, you ask another one to go to Google, another one to go to House over time. So you sort of, you through being proactive, distribute the people out to sort of fill up the platforms that need it at the time, if that makes sense. So we'll do that where we sort of monitor and manage which platform needs some love, and make that the one that you encourage people to go to, that month. Or you can even split it 50-50 and, half the people get pushed one way, half get pushed another way. There's even, if you use the right systems, with ours, it can intelligently recognize what type of account they might have. So if they're we can recognize if they're actually currently signed into Gmail, we know they've got a Google account. So that's a good one to ask to send to Google because they're already logged in. It's going to be so easy for them. Same with Facebook. We can recognize that they're logged into Facebook because it's easy to do in the technology. Therefore, we know that's a good option because we know they've got a Facebook account. So using the systems properly, it can actually let the system distribute the people out to the right place.
Okay, great. Hopefully, Carissa, that answers your question. Ella asked, I currently seek feedback by letting the client know feedback helps us improve and providing a link to our preferred platform. Is there a more effective way to do this, and how much should we be attempting to follow up if no feedback received?
Yeah, it becomes a bit of a numbers game. Like if you ever do email marketing, you sometimes have to play with your messages a bit to see what gets the best response. People, because this is becoming such a big thing, people get a lot of these emails now, or SMSs even, and the way you frame that and the exact words you use in the subjects and that kind of thing makes a difference to the responsiveness. What was the second part of that question? Sorry.
How, I guess, how often do you follow? Would you recommend following someone up? I guess if they're not leaving feedback, there might be a reason. I guess.
Yeah, look, you can't force somebody to. For us, we always send at least one reminder, but no more than two. Again, it depends on the project. Again, if we're talking about bigger projects, it might be that they want to wait. They're not sort of ready to give any feedback. They're still doing a wait and see approach. It does depend, where in your process you're asking. Is it the right timing? Because again, we find that if we ask for jobs completed, sometimes they'll write back and say, hey, I just want to see what happens. Like, we're not done yet, but things are okay so far. So feedback is sort of neutral, but they're okay, right? And that's still good to find out. But also, if you wait too long, then whatever emotion they had is possibly you've missed the moment. So you've got to look at your timing of exactly the best point in time to either trap the negativity or get the positivity based on your project itself.
Yeah, and I think maybe that would answer another question Carissa had when she said, what's the best time to ask for a review? Is it 4 months after handover or 6 months? What's best practice? And I guess if you're seeking feedback along the way, if you've got those checkpoints, you're at least going to catch anything negative along the way. And once you've handed a project over, if you leave it too long, I guess people are starting to forget that feeling of, when you've handed over the keys, people are excited. I know when I got a new car, after a while, it's, that new car feeling's gone.
Well, then it just becomes your old car. Well, that's the thing. If you're talking about like a full home construction, the exciting moment is when they, get the keys and take the home, but you sort of want to look at your own feedback that you do get about, well, do people tend to have a few issues in that first couple of weeks that you want the opportunity to resolve before you go ask for a review, or is it the perfect time? Because if you wait 4 months, 4 months to me sounds like a lot. It's a lot of time for something to go wrong. It's a lot of time for them to find this little thing that would start bugging them. So you probably want enough time to fix any issues, but again, because you want to ask for that feedback to find out what they are, I would suggest doing it relatively early to find out what you can fix, if there is anything to fix. And if there isn't, then you get to capitalize on their excitement and positivity. Because you fix something, then you ask again, did we fix everything? And they're like, yes, and then now they're happy. And you get that review.
And is there anything you can do about people who are attacking someone's business on their personal Facebook page and making it public?
Yes, we do get a bit of this. Facebook's not the most cooperative, but for sure they still respond to this kind of thing. It's So the short answer is yes, yes you can. It depends exactly what we're talking about. Is it posting to the wall? Is it a type of comment? We see
Yep.
all kinds of things where people put up fake pages. So all that content is what I would call sort of vulnerable in that Facebook has the power to take it down. Just need to bring it to their attention and argue a case about why it shouldn't be
Yep.
up.
Okay. Alyssa asked, do you deal with fake employee reviews on glassdoor.com?
Very much, very much. Yep, Glassdoor is one of our top two, I would even say, with Google. So Google's got the most volume for sure, but Glassdoor absolutely, because this is such a potentially damaging area. Glassdoor are actually quite good in their responsiveness. We have a good relationship with them. We really do get good results with Glassdoor. Again, never a guarantee, but yeah, it's a big yes on Glassdoor.
Okay. Michael asked, is there a platform that's more difficult than others to remove reviews from?
Yes, unfortunately, but it's the truth. Probably the worst in Australia, productreview.com.au. I probably have to be careful not to sort of fame them in what I say, but let's just say they are not particularly responsive or cooperative. It doesn't mean it's impossible, but they are at the hardest to deal with end of the spectrum compared to the others. We think largely just based on their capacity. I don't think they have a large team to work with. We tend to get the same people over and over who I think are overloaded, don't really want to cooperate. But it is absolutely still possible. It's just they're not, just don't have the same capacity. You find sort of idiosyncrasies with other platforms. So I believe it's Trustpilot. Trustpilot are quite slow, we find, but they still will be cooperative. However, they give the author a chance to change their review before they'll take something down. So it's not the nicest process because sometimes you put a bunch of work in and the reviewer like changes a few words and you've got to sort of start all over again. However, again, it still all depends what they've said. I sort of get things off Trustpilot too, but yeah, that top end of the spectrum is Google, Facebook, and Glassdoor, probably the big ones in Australia.
Okay, sorry, I'm just reading through. There's a lot of questions all coming in quickly, so they push others down. So if I don't see your question, please just type it back in again. Karen asked, what if they leave a 1 star but no comment?
Excellent question. They are the most difficult Google type reviews to get. We have been having success with them. The percentage sort of success rate is lower for sure because they sort of haven't paying themselves with. For sure, we have initially used to say no, we're not going to waste our time. But more recently, we actually have been having some success such that we will take a look. Again, it just depends on like the accounts that they've used. If we can sort of do some digging and find some other angles involved, that kind of stuff. So the short answer is yes. It is. Yes, it's difficult, but we do them. We have been doing them and getting some success.
So would
Not
there be a good response to someone who's just given a 1 star and no comment? That obviously they've
yeah.
should you respond to that or?
Yeah, those are the ones where I would first try to get it down, just because I've got a personal passion of I hate those. I just do not think they should be allowed. The fact that they haven't even had to explain anything about their experience or alleged experience is just, I just don't think it should be there. So I think they should be taken down. Yeah, this is an area where you can have a sort of a templated response where you're just sort of saying, you know, well, again, it depends on the scenario, right? Presumably you want it taken down because they were not a real customer, therefore something that is along those lines of, I don't recognise your name in our system and you haven't described your situation, so we have no idea what's upset you. Perhaps you should reach out to us and we can deal with it. Most people will probably prefer your response over the fact it's just this random 1 star. So.
Yeah. So Kerry's asked, can you advise the timing of responding to bad reviews?
I like how soon to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and I'm not sure. Yeah, that's yes. The response. How soon should you respond?
Yeah. So for sure, I'd say it's a bit like firing off email flames. You know, when your emotions gone down is the first rule. The second is, though, consider if you are going to take any other action. So if it's, again, in those three scenarios I gave, if it is one where you think they're being unreasonable and it should not be allowed to stand, we ask for you not to have a response up when we do our process. It legitimizes a bit too much, and it makes Google think that you've already mitigated the situation. So we tend to have just a lower success rate. So if you are going to pursue taking it down, then you actually hold off. Although you can always take it down and put it back up, so that's fine. So yeah, rule number one. Otherwise, if you're not going to pursue removal, is let your emotion die down. Then really you want to get your response up as soon as possible, because you need to mitigate that situation, and showing that you have fast customer service is not a bad thing at all.
Okay, Jay's asked, how do you find out who the author is if it's not obvious from their screen name?
Yeah, that's one of the difficult things that sort of makes this whole world of reviews unfair, because let's use Google as an example. Google says that they want you to use your real name, but they don't really enforce it. So this is one of the unfair, tricky things, is that you can't always figure it out, which thankfully can be grounds for us to challenge the review, because they haven't used a real name. Again, it's not going to be a guaranteed situation, but actually there's no easy magic sort of answer to that, because other than some sleuthing, it depends what they've sort of described, if you can sort of determine from that whether it relates to an experience that your company's had. And if you're a larger company with lots of customers, it's almost impossible. That's where you've got to, again, if you can't get it taken down, ask them to contact you offline, because you literally don't know how to address the situation otherwise, because they haven't identified themselves. So that's a way to mitigate it. You kind of want to deal with it offline anyway, but you're still showing that you're listening by posting a response.
Yep. So Amelia's got a unusual situation here. She said, is there any policy on Google or Facebook that mentions how long customers have to leave a review? As we recently had a customer leave a bad review for their job, which they did back in 2013.
Wow, yeah. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh. That's not fair. You know what? That's a very good question. My team that do this will know the answer better than me. I think it's a platform by platform thing. So I don't know if that was Facebook's. I don't think Facebook have a policy around that, but I know some of the other ones do, for sure. I think it's Yelp, which is not that common in Australia. But I think Yelp have a time window that they'll accept. I'm not sure platform by platform, but yes, some of them do. I'm sorry, I don't know Facebook's directly, but if you reach out to me at either of the emails I put in there, reach out to us. We'll take a look. It costs nothing to have a look. So my guys do this all day. They'll have the answer.
Oh, sorry. Kristen asked, is a survey a good way to get feedback?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That sort of helps you, especially if I like that one, especially if you have a reasonably large number of people in your list, such that it helps you organize their replies by giving them answers to choose from. If you've only got 10 or 20 people to ask, you just want to you want to sort of freeball it and let them sort of tell you what they want to tell you. But if you've got hundreds or more, surveys are great because it lets you collect their answers and categorize them a bit better, so you can get better insights out of it. Yeah.
Yep. Jason asked, can Removify remove bad comments, not a review, on a Facebook group page?
Yes, it is possible. It's back to that whole, it depends what they've said. It does depend what they've said, whether it's public facing. All Facebook content is subject to their content policy, basically. So the short answer is yes.
Okay, and sorry, these questions, some of them are getting duplicated here, so I'm just running through them again. You mentioned the system of requesting feedback via SMS, and Danielle asked, who can provide the service for requesting feedback by SMS or email, which can then automatically be converted to a review?
That last step, I'll just quickly correct the converted to bit. If it's something you want to post your own website, yes. For them to specifically post it, for example, converted to Google, it's not convert, it's they still have to take the action themselves. It's treated as sort of gaming the review if you post it on their behalf. You're not supposed to do that. But in terms of that whole process I described of encouraging it and making it all easy, I mean, it's one of our services, deliberately push it that way, but it's something that we do in a fully managed way where we just all set up for you. The main thing we just need is the customer lists, they call the customer details. You can provide us in all kinds of secure ways. Otherwise, if you run it for yourself, there's a lot of platforms out there now. If you're willing to set it all up for yourself, can't recommend any over the others because we don't use them. We've got our own. But if you do want to look them up, they're called review management platforms. I'll give you some I know in Australia. I think there's one called GatherUp. There's another one called Podium. Any Google searches for like review management where will show you a whole bunch. They all tend to operate in a similar way. They all tend to be about as successful as you can time into running them, which is why we do a managed solution where we do it for you.
Yeah, and I guess that's the issue with anything like this, trying to get things removed. You can try and do it yourself. It's just the time and how much effort you want to put into it. And
time and
Google.
expertise, right? What's your own expertise? We did the same. If you're not an expert at something, we someone else to do it.
I had a question early on. Sorry, let me just. What's the best way to deal with online reviews in which the clients are basically holding you to ransom with their review? They advise they won't remove the review until you fix something that wasn't caused by us.
Yeah, tricky because they're using it as a weapon in ways, as leverage. What you're saying. Can't give a golden rule because it's sort of case by case and what it would actually take to fix that situation and what your business decision is and what you're willing to invest to sort of fight it. I can certainly speak from the reviews point of view that if we can make it clear that that's what's happening or that review they've left up is violating policies, is not actually valid and able to stay up, and they can lose that leverage. You can sort of get that leverage taken away because they've sort of posted something with that intent. Unfortunately, though, it is the Wild West on most of the review platforms where, they can absolutely do it. So you sort of have to look at the real world scenario. How can it be mitigated? How many thousands of dollars are we talking about here? What is it going to cost you to mitigate? Like, just sometimes you got to bite the bullet, like a restaurant would do, give them a free meal just so you can move on with your business. But knowing that you don't have to do that, they don't have to hold. You're not necessarily hostage because maybe you can take that leverage away by getting their reviews taken down repeatedly, even if they want to keep coming back. I'd always pursue that option to take their leverage away at least.
Yeah. I'm just going to ask, John typed part of a question in, but I didn't get the first part of the question. So if John, I know you're still online, you mentioned something about Google and the older generation. So if you actually had a question around that, if you could just drop that back into the chat box, that would be great. Liz has said, now you're always going to be, your business, Andrew, is always going to be open to negative reviews because people like to test you, don't they, to see how you can get them removed. Liz has said, we noticed you had a couple of negative reviews on Google that don't have public responses. Is there a reason for this?
Yes, excellent question. It's because they are still under our process for removal because neither of them are real customers. As I said, nothing's guaranteed here, so we're still liaising with Google to get them taken down. And as I said before, we don't like to have responses up because your chances go down. We're still pushing because I know those two reviews. We know 100% they're not real customers. They're people who saw our Facebook ads. I think one is a competitor, we know, and the other one is someone who saw our Facebook ad and didn't really understand what we do and said that we're being unethical because we're taking things off the internet, not really understanding the scenarios behind it. So arguing that to Google is an ongoing process because they think maybe this guy's had dealings with it. So will we get them down for sure? Don't know. say for sure, because sometimes it just doesn't work out. But they're under process, and I'm comfortable. I mean, I'm comfortable for now that they're up, but
yeah,
hopefully
you're not immune to it either. Karen has said we've had clients post photos with no comment and we can't respond to photos. What's the best way to handle those?
I can't respond to photos on Google. Oh, sorry, the posting photos at the location. Now I understand. You can still challenge the content, so they can still be challenged because all of it is subject to the content policies. Yeah, I think you're right. You can't specifically respond to a photo. There's no mechanism for it. So you can only challenge it, get it taken down on some kind of grounds. Otherwise, that is actually an excellent question I haven't had before. I would have to get my team to tell me what they've done with those. Sorry, that's a unique scenario, but it's a good question. I have to see if there's some other way we've got mitigating those.
Yeah, I'm sorry, John has responded. He's just mentioned that he now gives his clients the option to leave feedback on his website because he was finding that some of his clients, well, a lot of his clients didn't have a Google account. So he's asking for some feedback on his website, which is always a good idea as well.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, if that was side of the question about the older generation, you're right.
Yeah, that's right.
If you don't have a Google account, then if Facebook can be relevant to your business, you can have a business page on Facebook, then a joke, but at the moment, the older generation are typically on Facebook, or more so than they used to be. So think about whether that might be valuable if Facebook can be an asset. But for sure, like something is better than nothing, as I was saying. Being proactive is key. So if your demographic are not on Google, then it's okay because they're not doing that for your competitor businesses either. So you're probably missing out in particular. Just need to give them whatever platform they can. Give their feedback.
Okay, I have one last question, then I better let you go, Andrew, because you probably have 100 other things you've got to do. I know you've just recently got back overseas. So Kristen has commented or asked the question, we have removed the review section on Facebook. Is this a good idea?
Yeah, look, that's not uncommon. So it's not as big a deal. Like the only time that would be concerning is if it's sort of well known that there was conversations happening there that you look like you're trying to hide. But otherwise, there's no obligation to have your reviews section turned on Facebook. Quite a lot of businesses don't. So in and of itself, it's not really an issue. That really only causes a PR issue again if people knew that something was happening there already. That had some kind of attention, and that they then want to kick up a fuss somewhere else because they know that's what you've done. Typically, don't see it as an issue. I'll be honest, I think we turned ours off because Facebook is a bit of the Wild West. For us, it's not an important platform for us to have reviews. Google is not important for us. So I certainly have no issue with it. We don't see the problem with it as a just sort of closing one of the doors.
Yeah, exactly. Alrighty, well, I think that was our last question. And if people do have more questions specifically for you, Andrew, your email address is on there. So I hope everybody's taken away some good tips. I know I have. There's a lot of things there that I hadn't actually thought about before. So thank you for that, Andrew. Thank you for pulling this all together. I know you're a pretty busy man these days. And thank you for jumping on to do your first webinar with us. Was there anything else you wanted to add, Andrew, before we say goodbye and let everybody get back to work?
Not really, other than if people do have ongoing questions. I mean, I think I mentioned this to you. Everyone's got their own little scenario that is sometimes unique. Email me, call the office. We've got a pretty big team here. Help out. And as I told you, Kerry, we have absolutely worked with the construction industry. We've had some wild scenarios of ex-employees going crazy. We have specific experience with builders, construction for sure.
Yep.
So we've seen some of these scenarios here.
Yeah, that can get crazy, can't it? Well, thanks again,
Yeah.
Andrew. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Keep an eye out for our next webinar that will be coming up. Actually, I've got another webinar tomorrow. I have another one next Thursday as well. So thank you for joining us today. If you are in New South Wales and require CPD points, please email me so I can add that to your diary. Once again, thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Please try and put some things into place where you're capturing feedback from your customers all the way along the customer journey so we can nip these sort of things in the bud. But if you do get into strife, at least we know there is a solution out there. So thanks again, everybody. Have a good afternoon. Bye.